Welcome to the Codcast with Bruce Mohl from CommonWealth Beacon. I was on vacation the last 2 weeks in Europe and had the opportunity to ride public transit in Barcelona, Rome, and Sicily. The difference between there and here was dramatic. Trains there were relatively new, clean, fast, and ran on time. The contrast with Massachusetts was stark, which is why it's such a pleasure to have Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton back on the show. He is the rare public official who has a vision for transportation in Massachusetts and is not afraid to speak his mind. He's back this time with a new study from the Harvard Kennedy School that he says makes building an underground rail link between North Station and South Station a no-brainer. Congressman, fill us in on this new research paper.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me back. It's always good to be on the show. You know, we have an urgent problem in Massachusetts, which is that South Station is at capacity. And so we have to do something. And for a long time, the state has been planning to just add more tracks to South Station. It turns out that it's very expensive to do and doesn't get you much benefit in return. But they've been plowing ahead with that project for a while. In the meantime, we've always talked about the rail link as something that would be great to have in the future, but I don't know, we can't really do it right now. But because both the rail link and South Station expansion solve this urgent capacity problem at South Station, I said, why are we not comparing these two projects? No study had ever been done to simply compare the two so that we can make the right decision. So that's what I commissioned Harvard to do. And look, as a longtime proponent of the rail link, I expected the rail link to come out better, but I had no idea it would be so stark. Basically, both projects solve the capacity problem at South Station, but that's where the comparison ends. The rail link would create a system with 20 times as many riders. So if you care about highway congestion, you should really pay attention. 20 times as more people getting out of their cars and onto the train. It would spur 15 times as much housing all around the Commonwealth as South Station expansion. We all know that Massachusetts has a housing crisis, so this should be front of mind as well. So when you do this comparison and you realize these projects both solve an urgent problem, but the rail link has massively more benefits, about $24 billion if you told them all up, more benefits than South Station expansion, it really becomes a no-brainer.
So you mentioned housing, and that is a hot issue right now, but just explain to our listeners how a rail link between North and South Station would be helpful to solving the housing problem.
Well, it's a great question because a lot of people think of this as just like some sort of shuttle or another subway between the two stations, and that's not what it is at all. What it means is that every train coming into Boston from the south or the west, including all the trains from places like Springfield and Worcester, the western half of the state, every one of those trains would continue right through the city, flow seamlessly to the north, and connect with every destination. So no matter where you're going on the commuter rail network that exists today, you would have a direct connection. And that means you can get where you're going faster than driving. That's the key. Creating a system where people can get around Massachusetts faster than driving. That's what encourages so many people to ride the rails. And because you can connect so seamlessly to different parts of the state, you have a lot more access to housing. So people who are working in places where there's not good housing nearby can easily commute to a place where they can build new affordable housing. And that's why it increases access to housing so dramatically. Incidentally, when we talk about access to housing, we're also talking about access to jobs. There's a lot more access to jobs with the rail link as well. I live in Salem, Massachusetts. I would never take a job on the South Shore because you can't get there from Salem, certainly not at rush hour. That could be a 2-hour trip in one direction. With the rail link, it would be about 40 minutes. So it's totally transformative. You can live on the North Shore and work on the South Shore. You can live in Worcester and get to the Cape on a Friday afternoon in the summer in no time at all, whereas you could be sitting for 3 hours in traffic. We know how bad that can get. That's why it's so transformative and incentivizes so much housing.
So we've talked about this. I looked it up. We chatted about this and other issues in April 2023. And I get your reasoning for comparing North-South Rail Link and the South Station expansion. That makes perfect sense. But your description of why this idea hasn't seemed to catch on so far is, yeah, it's a good thing, but maybe down the road or whatever. I think that's fairly accurate. Why is that, though? I mean, I think I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the political environment up here, because that's what you're trying to kickstart, I think, with
That's right.
with this study. Why is it so difficult to get people to grab onto this?
Well, I think there are a few reasons. First of all, we just seem to be afraid of doing big things. And yet, Massachusetts has a proud history of doing big things. I mean, as difficult as the Big Dig was at the time, everyone is so grateful for how it transformed downtown Boston. But this is actually a lot easier than the Big Dig, costs way less, and is something that dozens of cities all around the globe, including other cities in America, have already done. It's a very deep tunnel that goes right under the center of the city. You would not even know it's under construction when it's being built. Just a couple exits in the south and one in the north for the tunnel boring machine, they call it, to go into the ground. And so it causes almost no disruption to the city while it's being built. No disruption even to North and South Station. Trains just keep going into each station and terminating there as they do today while the tunnel is being constructed. But that concern that this is a big project, it's going to be another big dig, that's a big reason why people don't want to do it. I think another reason is that people kind of intuitively know that this is not something the T can handle. And I will be the first to say that the T should not build the rail link. When you look at how these projects have been completed successfully in other cities all around the globe, they usually form a P3, a public-private partnership, where you bring in the best expertise from the private sector that's incentivized to do this on time and on budget with the proper public oversight. And you essentially create this new entity, almost like a new company, just to do the project. That's what we would do here in Massachusetts. So don't think for a second we'd expect the T to take this on when they can barely handle what they've got.
So that all makes perfect sense, and the timing is interesting right now because the governor has set up a task force to look at how to build a sustainable transportation system, and I translate that into how are we going to come up with the money to do what we think we need to do with our transportation system. Are you familiar with that task force and what their goals are?
I am. I am. We have to create a sustainable funding stream for transportation in Massachusetts, and we don't have that right now. That's why the T is such a mess. We haven't been investing in it properly for decades.
I have to admit, I'm a little skeptical because there's been a lot of task forces in the past that have looked at what should we do about transportation and transportation financing. This one has gotten off to a bit of a rocky start. They have a pretty quick deadline that's coming up at the end of this year. Do you have much confidence that they're going to be able to set some big goals and pursue them?
I'm concerned. I think I share your concern, Bruce. They have a lot of work cut out for them, and they have not gotten off to a good start. But we know this is a problem we have to solve. So if this task force isn't the answer, someone, the governor, the legislature, has got to come up with a plan for sustainable funding. But back to the question at hand, whether the state should do South Station expansion or build the rail link, one of the most amazing conclusions of this new study is that the rail link generates so much additional revenue because of how many more riders get on trains with the rail link that it actually covers its own costs. The rail link costs somewhere between $2 and $4 billion more than building South Station expansion, but it generates $7 billion in additional fare revenue in just 20 years. And not only that, but if you expand South Station, you have this problem where you have all these trains coming in and just letting off their passengers and then being empty. Rather than flowing through the city like the rail link, they have to be backed out and stored in a downtown rail yard until they're needed again. And that's why the state plans to construct a rail yard at Wedette Circle, this big piece of undeveloped property between South Boston and Dorchester. It turns out on top of that, that the Wedette Circle property is not climate resilient. So it will be an underwater rail yard every time we have a major storm. But in contrast, if you build the rail link, because the trains just keep flowing right through the city, you don't need this rail yard. So rather than turning Wedette Circle into a rail yard, you turn Wedette Circle into a brand new neighborhood close to downtown, connecting South Boston and Dorchester. I mean, the climate justice, the racial justice benefits of that new neighborhood alone are hard to estimate. They're really, really impressive. So when you look at the benefits that come out of building the rail link, they more than cover the costs.
So the fare revenue and the riders, just as I asked about housing, is it because it will be easier to travel to where you want to go that revenue will go up and more riders will get on? Is that the reasoning behind that?
Easier and faster. It really enables a fully connected regional rail system where you can have trains showing up as frequently as every 8 minutes at the commuter rail stations that we have today. But rather than just get on a train in Salem or Andover and terminating at North Station, where you then have to figure out, how do I get to where I want to go in the city? And I really wouldn't even consider going beyond the city. You could take a train from Andover and go straight to the South Shore or straight to Worcester, straight to Foxborough to take in a Patriots game. Or if the train that you happened to get on was going to the South Shore and you wanted to go out to Springfield, well, then you just get off the train in Boston, wait on that very same platform just a few minutes for the next train to Springfield to come through, and you get on the train to Springfield. So it's seamless connections throughout the Commonwealth that make it faster than driving to take the train. That's why you get 20 times as many riders with the rail link as you do with South Station expansion.
You know, I have to say that it sounds great, and I totally get your argument, but I take your point about the T wouldn't do it. You would have some separate organization do it, but it's just sort of, it's almost hard to fathom that we could pull this off. What do you say to people? And they're sort of like, I don't know.
We are not going to fix Massachusetts transportation problems by thinking small. We've got to think big. We can't continue patching up the T. We've got to transform the system. And why should Boston not deserve the kind of rail service that you just explained experiencing in Europe, or we can experience anywhere in Asia? Fast, modern, all-electric trains that show up frequently and on time and get you wherever you want to go, not only downtown, but throughout the entire Commonwealth by just flowing seamlessly through the city. You can take a train from Maine to New York, which you can't do right now just because there's a 1 mile gap between North Station and South Station. I mean, it just makes no sense, the system we have today. So it has to be transformed. And if Massachusetts is ever going to fix our infamous transportation problems, this is the approach we need to take.
So I look back, and when we talked last April 2023, you were at that point saying you had met with the governor and the lieutenant governor and shared with them your ideas. Tell me where you are in talking with the governor, the lieutenant governor, about maybe this study, or just giving them an update about trying to gauge their what's your sense of what they're thinking?
My sense is that they're open to this discussion. And of course they should be. They don't want Massachusetts to make the wrong decision here. We could expand South Station and the project would literally be obsolete in less than 20 years. That would be a historic waste of taxpayer money. Or we could build a rail link that will last for a century, that will transform travel all around Massachusetts. That's the choice that we have to make. And ultimately, the governor is responsible for making that choice. So we want her to make the right choice here. And that's why it's so important that we compare these projects, just as Harvard has done.
And the timing here, obviously, it would take some time to build a rail link. Do we have that time? Because we're about to open next year, I believe, a new train line to the South Coast.
Yes, it's a great question, Bruce. we do have the time for two reasons. First of all, I know this sounds like a big project, but it's actually very common. These rail links are built all around the globe. London just completed its third cross-city rail link. So we know how to do these because they have so little environmental impact. You're not building a whole trench through the center of the city like we did with the Big Dig. You're just tunneling right through rock underneath. There's very little environmental impact and it's easy to get the approvals. So those are reasons why the project can be done relatively quickly. But the other thing it's important to understand is that when you're building this rail link, it does not disrupt traffic to South Station or North Station as they exist today. So the trains just keep running to these terminals until day one of the rail link, and you start shifting over one line at a time to go right through the city. As soon as you shift just one line from the south and one line for the north into the rail link, you've immediately solved the capacity problem at South Station. And then as more lines get electrified and equipped for regional rail with things like higher platforms, so it's easier to get on and off the trains very quickly, more of these existing commuter lines get shifted over to the rail link and you have a full regional rail system.
How big would this, do you envision just two tracks in this tunnel or many more?
Well, this is one of the questions that Harvard looked at. And I'll be honest, a lot of the international cross-city rail links are just two tracks. So I don't know. I kind of thought that maybe that was the conclusion they would reach. But actually, when they ran the numbers, they determined that a four-track rail link would make a lot more sense. And of course, you're not just talking about all the existing commuter rail trains becoming these fast, frequent regional rail trains like you have in Europe and Asia. You're also talking about every Amtrak train that comes up from New York now being able to continue to Maine and vice versa. If New Hampshire gets rail service someday, that means you can take a train directly from Concord, New Hampshire to New York, which obviously you can't do at all today. So there's huge potential here, and it would be a way to connect rail service from Maine to Miami in addition to connecting it all around Massachusetts.
And the four tracks would then, I'm just trying to envision this in my head. Some would stop and you would get on it, like if you were coming from the South Shore and you wanted to go west, you would stop and get off at South Station or North Station, or would you get off in between somewhere? How would that work?
Well, actually, there is a debate about whether we would build a third central city rail station or essentially just have underground versions of North Station and South Stations as they exist today. But whatever that central station is, and by the way, this means you can also connect directly to every rapid transit line in the city. But let's say you're just coming in as you describe, you're coming from the South Shore and you want to go right up to Rockport to go to the beach in the summer. And so you're on a train, but it turns out that that train is headed to Worcester. Well, then you just get off on the platform at this, let's just say it's at South Station. You get off there, you wait for the next train coming through on the same track or an adjacent track that's going to Rockport, and you just hop right on board. So
Right.
maybe the train you're on goes straight to where you want to go anyway. But if it doesn't, then you just wait on the same platform for the next train to come in just a matter of minutes that takes you where you want to go.
That makes a lot of sense.
And by the way, to New York too, like let's say I want to go from Salem to New York. I mean, these days it's so difficult to get from North Station to South Station, just fighting traffic and everything, that if I have time, I'll take the commuter rail into North Station and then walk to South Station. It's a 25-minute walk or so. But with the rail link, I could just get on a train in Salem, be straight to South Station in about 20 minutes, and then just take the next train to New York. Again, right on the same platform. Wouldn't even have to barely wait, would barely
right.
have time to sit down. So that's how transformative this is for getting all around the Commonwealth. And that's why it attracts so many more riders than you have on the commuter rail system today.
You know, as you speak, I remember former Governor Bill Weld would often talk about, as a college student, I believe, he would, I'm not sure exactly where he was coming from, but he would come into North Station and said he would have to schlep with his bags and all his stuff to South Station to get where he needed to go. And he said it was a nightmare. And I think he's been a big proponent of a north-south rail link. But it just sort of shows you how long this problem has been festering.
Actually, my understanding is that the first time this project was on the docket and then Massachusetts postponed it was due to the onset of World War I. So we've known for a long time that this makes sense. In fact, there's a great story about Abraham Lincoln taking the train south to Washington during the Civil War and having to get off the train in Baltimore to go across the city, just like you just described with Governor Weld, getting from North Station to South Station. And he encountered a really rough crowd making that cross-city carriage ride. But Baltimore solved that problem over a century ago by building the cross-city rail tunnel in Baltimore. So now you don't even think about the fact that if you're taking the train from Washington to New York, you just flow right through Baltimore, make a quick stop, and continue on your journey. But that wasn't always the case. This is a common problem that many cities have had historically. Boston is just late to the party in fixing it.
So obviously, this study is another convincing point in making your argument. What do you plan to do? Are you have any other strategy for getting Beacon Hill to pay attention to this?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we need the facts first, and that's why it's important to do the study. But now we need to talk about it. Your Codcast right now is helping with that. We want to make sure that people all around the Commonwealth, whether you're a decision maker on Beacon Hill or you're a taxpayer who just doesn't want to see your money wasted on a project like South Station expansion that will be obsolete in 20 years, we want to make sure everyone understands what this study shows, because it really is a no-brainer when you look at the results of this study. And by the way, in the process of doing this and really understanding how transformative this would be for the Commonwealth, we've really shifted from calling it the North-South Rail Link, which just emphasizes the connection between our two existing stations, and just calling it the Rail Link. Because it's not just about going north or south. It's about connecting every destination in the east with every destination in the west, which when you have a sort of long rectangular state like Massachusetts, of course, is really important. This is good for everyone in the Commonwealth, and we want to make sure people understand that.
Good point. I wonder if people will immediately pick up on that, but I'll make note of that when I write this up. Really appreciate it. Congressman, thank you for joining us and sharing your ideas again. And as usual, please come back frequently.
Absolutely. Let's continue the discussion.
Thanks again to Congressman Seth Moulton for joining me on the Codcast. And thank you for listening. I'm Bruce Mohl. Our producer is John Gee. Leave a rating and review wherever you're hearing this now if you want to help other folks find us, and email codcast@commonwealthbeacon.org if you ever want to get in touch directly. We'll see you again next week.